Amy from Fox Run Environmental Education Center, and today I'm going to talk to you about some of the gardening books that basically changed my life and set me on the course 30 plus years ago. And so before I get started, I'd like you to please like and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified when we have more gardening and self-sufficiency videos coming out. And also, we are developing more on-site programs as well as the classes we've been doing. This year we are going to be adding a women's homesteading workshop weekend. And on site we have released several classes. We have an online composting class that's free, and we are getting ready to release a class on self-sufficiency, and so all of those links will be in the notes in the bottom. So in the 1970s, I know I'm dating myself, I was a teenager, and the Back to the Land movement was very, very popular. And so I started reading a lot of Back to the Land books. I also read a lot of books by environmentalists. I was very into Rachel Carson and Jane Goodall and the work that they were doing. But I really started following a man named John Seymour, who wrote The Guide to Self-Sufficiency. And this book would be worth money if I'd taken care of it, but I dragged it everywhere, and it's the cover's torn up and the binding is all broken because I have definitely loved this book, but I have an original 1976 copy. And so I was young when he started his self-sufficiency movement, but I was very, very intrigued and wanted to, do more on my family's old plot of land. One of the things I love, I don't know if you are into pictures and kind of maps and things like I am, but I've always loved the illustrations in these books, where it kind of lays out, so here is what a 5-acre, farm looks like in his ideal. And you can see he has areas for livestock and horses, lots of different garden areas, pasture, hay. There's a pond and a fruit orchard. And so, but his books really go through all the different aspects of this one goes through all the different aspects of self-sufficiency. So there's not just gardening, but there's raising livestock and things like building fences and using wool from sheep. And this man actually did all this. He lived in several countries. He was British, but in the war he was in Africa, and he settled in Africa for a while. And he was kind of famous for only buying sugar and coffee and producing all other food that he and his family used. He has several books, but one of my other favorites of his book is The Self-Sufficient Gardener. And so it's kind of funny, the title is Using the New Deep Bed Method to Grow More Food in Less Space. And basically, he and Alan Chadwick were promoting the French intensive method, which basically we think of raised beds today, but that was a newer concept in the 70s and 80s. People tilled up a plot of land, and it was flat and smooth, and that's where they planted their seeds. But he started working with more selective beds. So this is just some pictures, and again, I just love the illustrations. But this is kind of what your spring garden would look like. And so sometimes I'm in Kentucky, so sometimes you kind of have to adjust because he was in Britain, Great Britain, when he read this or wrote this, and so sometimes their scheduling is a little bit different, but it is awesome. Another one of the authors that really impacted me as I was a young farmer was Gene Logson. And he was from Ohio, which wasn't too far from me. And I joined OFA, which is Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Administration, when I was in my 20s. And he was very active in that. And I met him and probably followed him around asking a lot of questions. He wrote several books. One of his most fun books to read is called The Contrary Farmer. And, but he wrote this book. This is actually one of the books he wrote later in life, called Small Scale Grain Raising. And that's really a concept I had not thought of for my self-sufficient garden before, meeting him. And but he really has some ideas about growing grains and being able to produce grains and flours and oats and those kinds of things in relatively small spaces. So not, a large farm with acres, but even in a suburban, raised bed. And so, Gene passed a few years ago, but he is an awesome writer, and his books are really great. And the other book that I wanted to share, I can't find the book. I probably loaned it to someone and didn't get it back. But the other authors that made a big impact on me were Helen and Scott Nearing. And they wrote a book called The Good Life. And the Nearings, and this was actually back in the 20s and 30s, were actually very politically rebellious. And so they decided, it kind of seems odd to us sometimes to think of the 30s as being, such an urban, time, but they were in a city. They were actually professors, and they decided that they did not like that lifestyle. And so they purchased property actually during the Depression in Vermont, and then they later moved to Maine. And so, but their books are about them buying their land and building a home and getting started with gardening. They didn't raise, they were vegetarians. They didn't raise any livestock or actually use any, livestock manure. They did a lot of work with green manures and composting leaves and whatnot. But their books are also very inspirational, and what they did, kind of starting from nothing and building up. And so they kind of left that legacy for the self-sufficiency and the organic food movements. So those are the books that I really kind of cut my teeth on, which got me, very excited about living an off-grid, sustainable lifestyle. My mother might have argued with me and said that it was the Little House on the Prairie books by Laura Ingalls Wilder that I started, at the age of 8 or 9 when I devoured her books. And I went through a period where I had to wear a sunbonnet on my head because Laura did. And so, but those are books that kind of shaped me and started me going. I'll do another video at some time featuring books that kind of more modern farmers and thoughts. So thank you for sharing with me and my little flashback of the past. And I hope that you are able to have the time to curl up next to the fire and enjoy a wonderful, gardening book this winter. So, thank you.